Welcome back, everybody. We're taking a look at a new article from the Oregon Journalism Project, which takes a deep dive into the state agency in charge of tourism, the Oregon Tourism Commission, which is commonly known as Travel Oregon. Reporter James Neff interviewed 24 industry professionals as well as current and former staff members of Travel Oregon for the story, as well as state lawmakers. He also reviewed financial records, audits, and other documents. And in his new article, Neff reports on concerns of an overpaid CEO, a lack of financial oversight at the agency, including a failure to hand out millions of dollars meant to help businesses survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me now to talk about it is James Neff himself from the Oregon Journalism Project. Jim, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Okay, so I want to begin with one description that you have for Travel Oregon. You call it a semi-independent agency. Can you please explain those choice of words?
It's a semi-independent agency in that, yes, they're public officials. Yes, it's totally funded almost by tax dollars, but it has different laws and regulations regarding budgeting, personnel, oversight, and contracting. Like other board-type agencies that are industry sectors, like the Wine Board, for example, the Oregon Journalism Project found that these semi-independent agencies are sort of light on regulation. Lawmakers can't insist on the budget. The commissioners, the 9-member commissioners of this nonprofit board, they're appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. And I said nonprofit, but this sort of quasi-independent agency is unlike other agencies that have thousands of employees and are subject to legislative review.
Yeah, and at just that, they're not required to get their budget approved necessarily every 2 years like every other state agency. Is that right?
They submit their budget. The word approval, the lawmakers can ask all kinds of questions. They can review it, but they can't approve it. They can't compel changes. But in reality, there's back and forth, and they do try to take care of that, but they are very on their own, and they assert their legal rights to do the way the agency has been set up.
And I know you mentioned in the article that in late 2021, the state allocated $10 million to Travel Oregon to distribute small grants to businesses that had been affected by drought, wildfires, the pandemic, really just to help them kind of survive. What did you find happened to that $10 million?
So that $10 million was a special grant, and so they pushed that out. But what they didn't do was they didn't push out the competitive grants where they had $4 or $5 million, about 10% of their overall lodging tax inflow. They didn't get that out to the people that needed it. So yes, they pushed out the emergency funds, but the grassroots, the tiny scores, dozens, 50 or more small grants that people actually applied for and expected, that was put on hiatus. And they didn't have the staff to push that out. And that money just kept getting rolled over from year to year. And it tallied as high as $9 million recently.
And so that, as of now, has not yet been distributed to those businesses that applied for that money?
That money, I'm told, is being pushed out, like half of it is being pushed out sort of now.
And it was meant to be distributed by 2023, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, this is money that needed to be put out there. And internally, some of their processes, some of their systems were not, they were kind of antiquated and things were not moving smoothly. It wasn't a well-run process according to insiders and according to documents that I reviewed.
Another focus of your article is the longtime CEO of Travel Oregon, Todd Davidson. He's been there since the late 90s, and I should mention that he announced his retirement from Travel Oregon back on May 22nd, just last week, while you were putting this story together. And his compensation is a focus in your story. Tell me more about your conversations with Davidson.
Well, I asked him about compensation, and he is highly compensated. His pay is not a secret now, but in 2020, a state audit pointed out that he was one of the highest paid directors in the entire state, double what an agency like ODOT with thousands and thousands of employees was getting paid. At the time, Travel Oregon had maybe 55 employees. They now have 73, and his total compensation for 2024, end of the year 2024, was $477. His base salary without the vacation payouts and others was $365, and so that's pretty high.
That's
$365,000 as a salary,
Okay.
and it's among the highest in the state. We've got some, maybe some coaches, maybe some, medical professionals that make more.
And I know that you spoke to state lawmakers who kind of had their own thoughts about Davidson's pay. What did they tell you?
Well, some of them said that they tried to, when they heard about this compensation in 2020, they carried in a bill the next year that said, okay, $250,000, that's tops for agencies. They wanted him to take a pay cut. And unless you tell the public online that there's a reason why this public employee deserves the extra stuff, because it's difficult, it's hard to get people, it's complex, whatever the reason. So that bill didn't pass, but the idea of that high salary became toxic for Travel Oregon in the opinions of people that I interviewed.
One last focus I want to touch on was that the reports that you heard from former employees of Travel Oregon and other folks who had said that the environment of working at Travel Oregon was less than ideal. Can you describe kind of what did you hear and what did Travel Oregon say when you brought those concerns to them?
So I quote from 3 on-the-record letters by top managers who left Travel Oregon, were pushed out, or fired. And they shared these letters with the 9-member governor-appointed commission that oversees the agency, approves its budget, approves the CEO's compensation. And they said that it was a very fearful environment, that people were not comfortable in pushing for improvements to anything from let's get the contracts out to these scores of grantees, to our IT systems don't work together, to we're spending too much time here and not enough time there. Many people, more than a handful of people who didn't want their names used told me that they didn't speak out because they saw what happened to these other folks who they admired. They were pushed out.
And what did Travel Oregon say when you brought those concerns and those kind of reports, on record concerns?
Well, Todd Davidson, the CEO, said that in his opinion, it was not a fearful place. People can talk to him. He said he had a one-on-one meeting with everybody after, when they all went home or came back from COVID. But, and the commissioners said that when they did get a complaint, they took it very seriously. For example, one they got last September, they investigated it, and they took it into consideration as they were evaluating him. So Todd Davidson said it's not. He denied their accounts, but that's their truth and that's his truth, and he pointed to evaluations that gave him good marks, surveys of the employees who responded.
Okay. So there's a lot to cover and a lot to talk about, obviously, in this article. Looking forward now, what do you think are kind of the next steps in this story, whether it be financially? Obviously, CEO Todd Davidson has already announced his retirement, and that will happen in the next year, he says. What's next for this story, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know what's next. Time will tell, but I do know that outside of, my circles, journalism circles, I'm hearing that, lawmakers want to revisit and see if the sort of light hand on this semi-independent agency is correct. Do they want to, talk about compensation? He's going to be around, he said, picking his successor or being involved in the process. Some have said, why is he sticking around for a year? I don't know what will happen. I don't know if I'll have another story, but I'm telling your listeners, if you know about travel to Oregon and you have tips or you want to talk about it, I'm easily reached at, Oregon Journalism Project. We're a nonprofit and we love to do some public service journalism.
Yeah, and it's a matter of what will lawmakers do next with this information. All right. Jim, Neff from the Oregon Journalism Project, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.